Let me ask you something powerful. Why is it that out of all the women he meets, one stays on his mind? Not the loudest, not the most available, not even the most conventionally perfect, but one woman who shifts something in him so deeply that he can't stop thinking about her. This doesn't happen by accident. It happens because she activates something rare. Here's why. Because the woman who becomes unforgettable is never the one who abandons herself to be chosen. She's the one who chooses herself first, and paradoxically, that's exactly what makes him lean in. You see, when a woman has a full life, something subtle but powerful happens in the dynamic. She's not scanning the room for approval. She's not adjusting her personality to be more palatable. She's not shrinking her opinions or overextending her energy just to keep someone interested. She walks into a connection already grounded, already whole, already moving somewhere meaningful. And that creates a kind of gravity you can't fake. When a man meets a woman like this, he feels it immediately. There's no desperation in her energy, no silent plea for validation. Instead, there's calm, there's presence. There's a sense that she's happy to share her world, but she doesn't need someone to complete it. That difference changes everything, because the moment a man senses that a woman's happiness doesn't depend on him, his attraction doesn't decrease, it intensifies. Why? Because now being with her feels like a choice, not a responsibility. She doesn't cancel plans with herself to accommodate him. She doesn't rearrange her values for proximity. She doesn't rush emotional intimacy in hopes that closeness will secure commitment. And in doing so, she sends a powerful unspoken message. I enjoy you, but I respect myself. That message lands deeply. It tells him that her time is valuable, that her attention is earned, not assumed. And suddenly, he's not being chased, he's being invited. That's the shift where obsession begins to form. A woman who chooses herself doesn't withdraw warmth. She's not cold, guarded, or unavailable. She's open, expressive, affectionate, but only in ways that feel aligned with her truth. She doesn't give more than she's comfortable giving just to be liked. And that authenticity is magnetic, because people can feel when someone is acting from wholeness instead of fear. Fear pushes, wholeness attracts. And here's the part most people miss. Choosing yourself isn't about playing hard to get. It's about being hard to lose, not because you threaten to leave, but because your presence adds value. You bring joy, depth, laughter, and perspective into the space, and you do it without asking for permission. You don't audition for love. You allow love to meet you where you stand. When a man encounters this, his instincts shift. He becomes more attentive, more curious, more invested, not because he's being manipulated, but because he feels something rare. He senses that being close to you is a privilege, not a guarantee. And the human mind is wired to value what isn't endlessly available, but is deeply rewarding when present. This is also why she doesn't rush outcomes. She's not trying to lock things down prematurely to calm her anxiety. She trusts that if something is meant to grow, it will grow through mutual effort, not pressure. That patience communicates confidence. It says, I trust myself to walk away if this doesn't align. And confidence like that creates respect. Respect creates attraction. Attraction deepens into fixation. Choosing yourself also means you don't tolerate crumbs and call it a meal. You don't justify inconsistency or overanalyze mixed signals. You pay attention to how you feel around someone, and you honor that information. If something feels off, you don't panic. You observe. You stay connected to your inner compass instead of outsourcing your worth to someone else's behavior. That self-trust is powerful. It makes your yes meaningful and your no unforgettable. And when a man realizes that being with you isn't about possession, but about partnership, something shifts in him. He doesn't want to lose access to the version of himself that shows up around you. He starts imagining a future, not because you pushed him there, but because your presence enhances his present. You didn't convince him. You didn't persuade him. You simply stood firmly in who you are. Because the woman who chooses herself first doesn't chase love. She becomes the place where love wants to stay. And once that initial attraction is there, once he's already leaning in, there's something even more powerful that determines whether his interest fades or deepens into something he can't shake. It's emotional safety. Not drama, not intensity, not the roller coaster of highs and lows that people often mistake for chemistry. Emotional safety. Because while chaos can grab attention, it never holds the heart. The woman who becomes unforgettable is the one with whom he feels at ease being himself. Not the polished version, not the one who always has the right answers, but the real version, uncertain at times, thoughtful, imperfect, human. With her, he doesn't feel like every word is being evaluated or every emotion will be used against him later. He feels free to exhale, and that exhale is rare. You see, many men move through relationships feeling like they have to perform, to be strong, to be impressive, to have it together. And when they sense that vulnerability might be met with criticism, dismissal, or pressure, they shut down. They don't open up more, they retreat. But when a woman creates a space where emotions are allowed to exist without being interrogated or fixed, something changes. He doesn't feel trapped, he feels welcomed. She doesn't demand that he articulate his feelings perfectly. She understands that sometimes clarity comes after silence, not during it. She gives him room to process, without assuming the worst. That patience doesn't push him away, it draws him closer. Because now, instead of feeling chased, he feels trusted. And trust is one of the strongest emotional bonds there is. Emotional safety doesn't mean she accepts poor behavior or avoids hard conversations. It means she handles those conversations with calm instead of chaos. She speaks honestly without attacking. She expresses needs without ultimatums. She doesn't use emotions as weapons. And because of that, even difficult moments don't feel threatening, they feel constructive. He knows that being honest with her won't lead to punishment. It will lead to understanding. And here's the key. She doesn't confuse intensity with intimacy. She doesn't rush deep emotional disclosures to force closeness. She lets intimacy build naturally, through consistency, presence, and shared experiences. That gradual molding creates a sense of safety that feels earned, not forced. And when intimacy feels earned, it's cherished. When a man feels emotionally safe, he starts to associate that feeling with her presence. His nervous system relaxes around her. His mind stops scanning for danger or conflict, and the body remembers that. He may not consciously say, "I feel safe with her," but he feels it in the way he wants to linger, in the way he opens up without being asked, in the way her absence feels noticeable. This is why she doesn't overreact to every emotion he expresses. She doesn't panic when he shares doubt. She doesn't interpret vulnerability as weakness. She understands that emotions are information, not threats, and that understanding makes her a place of refuge, not resistance, a place where he can land instead of defend. And when a woman becomes that place, she stands out instantly. Because the world is loud, expectations are heavy, and emotional safety is rare. He may not have the language for it, but he knows that being with her feels different, lighter, clearer, more grounded, and the human mind naturally wants to return to what feels grounding. She also knows how to listen, not just to respond, but to understand. She's present, she's curious, she reflects back what she hears instead of redirecting the conversation to herself. That kind of listening makes a person feel seen, and being seen is one of the deepest human needs. When a man feels seen without being judged, he feels connected without being controlled. This doesn't mean she absorbs his emotions or takes responsibility for fixing them. She doesn't lose herself in his inner world. She remains steady. And that steadiness creates trust, because now he knows she can hold space without collapsing under the weight of it. And that reliability makes her someone he can't easily replace. Over time, that emotional safety becomes the foundation for everything else. Attraction deepens, affection grows, commitment feels less frightening and more natural, because being with her doesn't feel like pressure, it feels like peace. And that's when interest turns into attachment, because while passion may ignite the spark, emotional safety is what keeps the fire burning. And once emotional safety is established, once he feels calm and connected in your presence, something else quietly begins to take hold: curiosity. Not the shallow kind that fades after a few conversations, but the deep, lingering curiosity that keeps a person thinking long after the moment has passed. Because the woman who becomes unforgettable is not the one who reveals everything all at once. She's the one whose life, energy, and inner world feel rich, textured, and alive. She has a life that doesn't revolve around waiting. She's engaged with her passions, her friendships, her interests, her growth. And when she talks about her life, it doesn't sound like a resume or a performance. It sounds like someone genuinely enjoying the process of becoming. That's captivating. Because when a man senses that a woman's life is full, he doesn't feel like he's being asked to fill a void. He feels like he's being invited into something already meaningful. She doesn't overshare in an attempt to fast-track intimacy. She understands that mystery isn't about secrecy, it's about pacing. She lets stories unfold naturally. She allows moments to breathe. She doesn't rush to explain every thought or justify every feeling. And that restraint creates space for imagination. The mind leans in when it doesn't have all the answers yet. Curiosity thrives in that space. He starts wondering what else she's thinking, what shaped her, what experiences she's had, what dreams she hasn't shared yet. And curiosity is powerful because it keeps the mind engaged. It's not obsession rooted in insecurity. It's fascination rooted in depth. She also knows how to be present without being predictable. Conversations with her don't follow a script. They move naturally, sometimes light, sometimes thoughtful, sometimes unexpected. She asks questions that reveal interest, not interrogation. She listens in a way that makes him want to keep talking. And because she's not trying to impress, her authenticity becomes the most impressive thing about her. A woman like this doesn't rely on constant availability to stay relevant. She doesn't text endlessly to maintain momentum. She allows space, not as a tactic, but as a reflection of her real life. And in that space, something interesting happens. He fills the gaps with thought. He replays conversations. He wonders when he'll see her again. Absence, when paired with substance, doesn't weaken connection. It strengthens it. Her curiosity about the world also sparks curiosity about her. She's open-minded. She's evolving. She's not rigid in her identity or stuck in one version of herself. There's movement in her, growth. And people are drawn to growth because it feels alive. He doesn't feel like he's stepping into a finished story. He feels like he's witnessing a journey. And importantly, she doesn't manufacture mystery by withholding affection or playing games. She's warm. She's expressive. She just doesn't over-explain or overexpose. She trusts that the right people will stay curious without being fed constant reassurance. That trust communicates confidence, and confidence is endlessly intriguing. When a man senses that a woman has layers, he wants to explore them, not conquer them, not decode them, but understand them. Each interaction feels like a discovery, not a repetition. And because discovery activates dopamine, his brain starts associating her with excitement and reward. He looks forward to seeing her not because he needs validation, but because he genuinely enjoys the experience. This is also why she doesn't try to be everything to him. She allows him to miss her. She allows him to wonder. She allows the connection to breathe. And in doing so, she becomes someone he thinks about in the quiet moments, on his commute, before sleep, in between tasks. Not because she demanded attention, but because she earned interest. And as curiosity deepens, emotional investment follows. Because when someone captures your mind, your heart eventually joins. He starts to feel a pull, not from pressure, but from possibility. Being with her feels expansive, interesting, alive. And that's the power of a woman whose life inspires curiosity. She doesn't try to hold his attention. She gives his mind something worth returning to. And as curiosity turns into emotional investment, there's another subtle but decisive shift that determines whether his feelings stabilize or spiral into confusion. It's the difference between a woman who makes him feel needed and a woman who makes him feel genuinely desired. Those two experiences may sound similar, but emotionally they live worlds apart. The woman who becomes unforgettable doesn't cling. She doesn't attach her sense of worth to his presence or his approval. She doesn't treat him as the source of her happiness. And because of that, when she expresses interest, it lands differently. It feels clean, it feels chosen, it feels real. He knows that if she's there, it's because she wants to be, not because she can't function without him. That distinction is powerful. When a man feels needed, there's pressure, there's responsibility, there's the quiet fear of being someone's emotional lifeline. And pressure suffocates attraction. But when he feels desired, there's freedom, there's excitement, there's a sense of being valued for who he is, not for what he provides. Desire invites him in. Need pushes him away. She shows interest without overinvestment. She's affectionate without being dependent. She communicates warmth without seeking constant reassurance. And because she's not anxiously monitoring the connection, he doesn't feel monitored either. He feels relaxed, he feels trusted, and that trust creates space for him to step forward willingly. A woman like this doesn't subtly guilt him into attention. She doesn't make him responsible for her moods. She doesn't interpret every delay as rejection. She understands that two emotionally healthy people can want each other deeply without being fused together. That emotional independence is deeply attractive because it signals strength, maturity, and self-respect. When she says she misses him, it doesn't feel heavy. It feels flattering. When she expresses affection, it doesn't feel like a transaction. It feels like a gift. And gifts are received with joy, not obligation. That's why her desire lands so powerfully, because it's offered freely, not demanded. She also allows him to give. She doesn't rush to meet every need herself or reject his efforts out of pride. She appreciates what he brings without relying on it for stability. That balance makes him feel capable and wanted, not used. And when a man feels wanted for who he is, not just what he does, his emotional investment deepens naturally. This woman doesn't fear losing him because she knows she would survive. And paradoxically, that lack of fear makes the connection stronger. There's no emotional bargaining, no overcompensation, no panic-driven attachment. Instead, there's calm confidence. She's present but not gripping, open but not dependent, and that steadiness is magnetic. He senses that being with her is an enhancement, not a requirement, that she chooses him but doesn't need him to complete her, and that choice means everything, because now staying feels intentional. It feels like mutual desire rather than emotional obligation. Over time, this dynamic changes how he shows up. He becomes more proactive, more generous, more consistent, not because he's afraid of losing her, but because he wants to keep earning a place in her life. Desire invites effort, need drains it. And in the quiet moments, when he reflects on how he feels around her, there's no weight in his chest. There's excitement, there's appreciation, there's clarity. He doesn't feel trapped, he feels chosen, and choosing her back feels easy, because the woman who makes a man feel desired, not needed, doesn't ask him to save her. She invites him to walk beside her. And when a man feels chosen rather than relied upon, when desire replaces pressure, the next thing that determines whether his attraction deepens or dissolves is boundaries. Not rigid walls, not ultimatums, but clear, calm, self-respecting boundaries that quietly communicate value. Because the woman who becomes unforgettable doesn't argue for her worth. She lives it. She knows what she will accept and what she won't, and she doesn't announce it with drama. She doesn't threaten to leave to gain compliance. She doesn't deliver emotional speeches to convince someone to treat her well. Instead, she pays attention. She observes behavior. And when something doesn't align, she responds with clarity rather than chaos. That response is powerful because it's rare. Most people react from emotion in the moment: anger, fear, disappointment. She responds from self-trust. She doesn't raise her voice to be heard. She doesn't over-explain to be understood. She simply states what works for her and adjusts her presence accordingly. And that quiet certainty speaks louder than any confrontation ever could. When a man encounters this, something shifts internally. He doesn't feel controlled. He feels oriented. He understands where he stands. There's no guessing, no emotional minefield. And clarity creates respect. Respect deepens attraction, because when boundaries are clear, the connection feels stable, not volatile. She doesn't chase after inconsistency, hoping it will turn into effort. If communication drops, she doesn't flood the space with messages. She doesn't punish or manipulate. She simply matches energy and stays anchored in her OWN life. That consistency in her standards sends a powerful message. Access to her is earned through behavior, not promises. And here's the key: she doesn't enforce boundaries with resentment. She enforces them with peace. There's no bitterness, no scorekeeping, just alignment. If someone can't meet her where she is, she doesn't try to drag them there. She lets them be who they are and decides what that means for her. That emotional maturity is disarming. A woman like this doesn't need to demand commitment to feel secure. She feels secure because she trusts herself to walk away from what doesn't serve her. That self-trust changes the entire dynamic. It removes fear from the equation. And when fear leaves, attraction has room to grow. He notices that she doesn't tolerate disrespect in subtle forms either. Not just obvious boundary crossings, but small patterns, dismissiveness, inconsistency, lack of effort. She doesn't dramatize them, but she doesn't ignore them. She addresses what matters and releases what doesn't. That discernment makes her presence feel intentional, not reactive. And because she's not constantly negotiating her standards, he feels challenged in the healthiest way. Not challenged to prove himself through grand gestures, but challenged to show up consistently, honestly, and with integrity. Her boundaries invite his best behavior, not through force, but through respect. This is where obsession quietly forms, because he realizes something important. Not everyone gets to stay close to her. Not everyone gets access to her time, her energy, her intimacy. And that exclusivity isn't manufactured. It's a natural result of her self-respect. He understands that being with her is a privilege, not a default. And if he values her, he rises. He becomes more intentional, more reliable, more aware. Because the cost of losing someone with standards feels real, not because she threatens it, but because she's shown she's capable of choosing herself. She doesn't use boundaries as leverage. She uses them as alignment. And alignment feels safe. It feels honest. It feels adult. And adult attraction is deep, lasting, and rooted in respect. Because the woman who holds her boundaries calmly doesn't push love away. She filters for the kind of love that can actually stay. And when all of this comes together, self-respect, emotional safety, curiosity, desire without need, boundaries held with calm, there's one final shift that transforms attraction into something lasting. She becomes the mirror in which he sees the best version of himself. Not because she flatters him endlessly, not because she inflates his ego, but because around her he feels more capable, more grounded, more aligned with who he wants to be. This woman doesn't try to change him. She doesn't manage his potential or micromanage his growth. She doesn't push him to evolve through criticism or pressure. Instead, she believes in him in a way that feels steady and real. She notices his strengths. She acknowledges his efforts. She reflects back his values when he forgets them himself. And that belief does something profound. It invites him to rise. When a man feels judged, he defends. When he feels controlled, he resists. But when he feels believed in, he expands. With her, he doesn't feel like he's constantly falling short. He feels like he's stepping into himself. That feeling is intoxicating because it's not about approval. It's about identity. She sees who he is beneath the surface, not just what he does. She recognizes his intentions, not just his outcomes. And when he stumbles, she doesn't shame him or withdraw affection to teach a lesson. She stays grounded. She holds perspective. She expects accountability, but she also expects growth. That balance makes him feel respected rather than managed. And because she doesn't need him to be perfect, he feels safe being honest. He doesn't hide his doubts. He doesn't mask his fears. He doesn't feel like vulnerability will cost him attraction. In fact, he feels that being real with her brings them closer. That emotional permission allows him to show up more fully, not just for her, but for himself. She also challenges him, but not through criticism, through example, through standards, through the way she lives her life with intention. He sees how she chooses herself, how she communicates clearly, how she holds boundaries without cruelty, and without her saying a word, he starts asking himself better questions. He wants to be more present, more consistent, more aligned, not to earn her love, but because being around her elevates him. This is where the bond deepens